Hey Nerders, Dynasty Nerds back again, and this week we're talking Dynasty running back buys. Yes, buys. Running back's the most fluid position on your roster, but when you're a contender, there's value to be had.
We got to keep these running backs moving.
That's right. We got some old guys, some young guys, a little bit of everything in this episode.
Let's hit the ground running.
Ready, set, hut, hut. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Dotson. He's Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
And he's Garret Price.
How's it going?
No Jared Wackerly. He's California dreaming. But we're here talking Dynasty Fantasy Football running backs.
The running back, y'all.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That implies just one, though.
Running backs.
All right, there we go.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Who?
Running backs.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Tell your friends. So Dynasty Fantasy Football running backs. So the next 2 weeks, we're going to do running back buys, running back sells. Next week, we'll do wide receiver buys, wide receiver sells. We're doing buys this episode, sells on the next episode. Next week, we'll flip-flop that for you.
Flip it.
And then I think the week after that, we'll cover quarterbacks and tight ends.
Yeah, but they only get one episode. They don't each get two episodes.
Yeah, one player each. We'll each have two players each for this episode.
Right.
Then I'll be gone for 2 weeks. I'm going to go over to Ireland and hang out for 2 weeks. So it'll be these guys over talking Dynasty Fantasy Football. Some of you guys might like that. Most of you won't. Most of you won't. I get it. Most of you will be in despair and miss me a lot, and I get it.
Wailing, gnashing of teeth.
Happens every day I walk out the door with my wife.
sacks.
I'm like, bye. And she's like, baby, don't go.
Then there'll be like those two people that are like, you guys should have your own show. That other guy talks too much.
Yeah, I do.
This is the best show I ever heard.
Don't invite me to be a guest on your show because I'll talk more than you. So, when you say running back sell in the game of Dynasty Fantasy Football, it's really kind of like funny because it really should just be a standard status at all times.
Yeah.
Like the running back should be the most fluid position on your roster at all times. It's the shortest shelf life of a player. I mean, maybe outside tight end for the production wise. The average running back you're going to get 2 to 3 years out of. And that's like you hope to get one running back 1 year and then 2 up to 3 running back 2 years. That's usually how it goes for most of those players.
Yep.
A lot of them you don't even get one running back 1 year out of them.
Right.
So you're hoping to get a couple of running back 2 years out of them and then they move on because in NFL they move on because of salary. And once they get that second contract, it's hard for them to even play off that whole second contract, let alone nobody's getting a third contract. So unfortunately, once you're at that
Frank
age
Gore,
of
right?
yeah,
I think he got a contract last year, didn't he?
in MMA,
Probably.
but once you hit 28 years old, there's usually kind of a wall there that just naturally hits, and you're always gonna have outliers, and you're gonna have those generation running backs. But even then, more so, you're looking at guys that catch the football. It's why the PPR running backs are so important and viable. I mean, look what Jerick McKinnon did last year because he's a pass catcher running back. We see those guys come in and year out, and when you play Dynasty, it really should be your main focus should be always be on first contract guys. And right when they're about to sign that second contract, or they do sign that second contract, one, if you're good enough to get a second contract, that means you're doing pretty well. And there's some value there. And you're usually only about 25, 26. And sometimes it's hard to give that up, right? Like it's hard to get out from that running back when he signed a second contract, when he's going off of good numbers. But you have to understand that by not moving him, and again, it's either a contender or not when it comes to running backs.
Right.
I'll get to that in a second. But if you hold on to him, that window starts to close rapidly. It's not like all of a sudden he's 25 and then he's 26 and the price tag's already gone down after 1 year if he stays healthy. And then once you hit 27, when you start hitting that like the Dalvin Cook age, like the floor almost plummets because nobody wants to buy them for long term. Now, if you wait mid-season and they're performing really well and a contender needs a running back, you usually squeeze a first out of them for those guys. But that's the only scenario you're getting a first for those guys.
But sometimes the opposite can be true. And we might even talk about a couple of those guys where even though they're old, they still have some value, and you can get some sneaky good value out of some of these old guys.
Well, those are going to be talking about some of the buys today. Some of the guys are old, and there's really good value there sometimes if you play your cards right. And that's Dynasty as a whole. Like that, you get the discount on age is such a good discount. It's hard for you not to go in there and really take advantage of that if you're a contender. Right. There is championships that can be bought, and all it costs you is draft picks. And it's a reason why I constantly trade my draft picks, because I'm looking for hits right away. Even when you have guys that are younger in youth, especially at the receiving position, those guys take time to develop. Even the high-end guys, like for those first 2 to 3 years, you're lucky to get wide receiver 2 production out of them. Lucky. Mm-hmm. Like, doesn't matter where they're drafted or any player, you're lucky to get that out of a player. So it takes time to develop. The one position that's hit the ground running as high-end, as decent running backs is the running back position. So if you build around youth at receiver, tight end, and quarterback, the easiest plug and play is to draft your running back late in the draft. Like somewhere like this year, you can get a guy like Tajay Spears. You can get a Kendre Miller in the back end of the draft.
I almost made Spears my buy, and I was like, we've talked about that.
You can't do that.
Cannot beat that horse anymore.
And then in recent years, like there's guys that have shown up like Dameon Pierce that have been coming right away. The starters are later. Isaiah Pacheco's that you come and get in running back.
James Robinson wasn't even drafted, and he was a running back 4 overall his rookie season.
And that was it. But
he was.
But then when you're a contender, it's real easy to buy running backs in 2-year windows. And I say 2-year windows because it is important, because most running backs, you're going to get 2 to 3 year windows out of them, period. So if you could buy a guy like some of the guys we're talking about today, and one guy we're not going to talk about, like even a Joe Mixon, and odds of Joe Mixon being just about done are pretty evident. But you're going to get production out of him this year, and you probably get some production out of him next year. Zeke Elliott 2 years ago fell in this category, fell into a good buy. But if you can get 2 years out of a guy for a late first, that's not terrible value. And honestly, if you can give up your first for 1 year of really good value and it helps you win a ship, it was worth it. And that's the goal, to constantly put yourself in position to then trade those picks. And it doesn't always have to be a first. Sometimes it can be multiple seconds for some of these running backs, like we're going to talk about today. So I'm real excited about this. Just always know the running back should be very fluid on your roster at all times. And it doesn't matter how good that running back is, they should be available. And if you're not a contender, remember this. We talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. If you're not a contender and you're in rebuild, you honestly shouldn't have any running backs on your roster. You should literally trade all of them away for any draft capital that they're worth. And then you finish with a higher draft pick, and you finish with a higher draft pick.
And you finish with a higher draft pick.
That's it, because you have no running backs to start. It's a real good way to kind of like tank the system when there's no tank involved. Like, dude, I'm not tanking. I just don't have any running backs to start. Like, I'm starting Ty Chandler.
Hey,
yeah,
he's on a roster.
So we
talked about it.
Cook might be gone. You never know.
All signs are pointing. You see, I saw the thing on Pro Football today. The Vikings sneakily changed their Twitter header. They took Dalvin Cook off and put Alexander Mattison on.
Oh,
yeah. So,
by the way, one of my buys last year was Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, he falls in a category of a good buy this week. It'd be
him, not anymore.
I was going to say, maybe not anymore.
Him, Ty Chandler, Dwayne McBride. For example, one of the guys we got in our my Ohio Dynasty League with Bob Lung, I gave up my 24 first. I got Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook back, I won the league last year, so I feel really good about that combination.
Absolutely.
So we're going to get to some of these guys that we like, that we think are some good buys. Next episode, we're going to think are some good sells. Usually if we're saying buy, it's because you're in a contender. By the way.
Right? Yes. I mean, that's the only way to look at it.
There's almost never. The one exception was Alexander Mattison. I was like, he might be a good buy for like a future build because of his age, but 95 to 99% of the time, it's going to be you're buying a running back because you're a contender.
And sometimes too, when you say buy, like Alexander Mattison would fall into the category, even as a buy now, is you buy now not for the longevity of it. You're just buying for the value uptick, right? Like you're going to buy Alexander Mattison now because then once Dalvin Cook gets cut, his price tag goes up a little bit. Once he gets on the field, week 1, week 2, and he's putting up solid numbers because he's a very nice, solid, big running back, one of the bigger bruiser kind of backs out there, then his value goes up a little bit. And maybe you bought him for a second, and now all of a sudden a contender's team running back goes down. He needs a starter. Boom, you trade Alexander Mattison for a first. Yep. It's a very simple game sometimes where you're just kind of like slowly trying to uptick where you're like, hey, I'll trade this penny for a paperclip. I'll trade this paperclip for an envelope. 100%. I'll trade this envelope for a toy car for a real car. You know what I mean? Like that's the process sometimes in Dynasty. You're just constantly trading this little chip for a slightly bigger chip. And that's how you get better draft capital, and that's how you get better players. And you put yourself out there and you take risk because this game is full of risk, and that's what you have to do to come out on top because it's not easy. all these talented players aren't going to fall into your lap, or these draft picks aren't going to fall into your lap. You have to go out there and work for it. And that's why you listen to shows like this, and you go to websites, and you listen to other great Dynasty shows as well, is always to find those values. And you're just finding somebody that kind of like some information you can grasp onto, agree with, and go make that move. And, we preface that by saying that not all these work out. It's impossible to buy it 100%.
Right, absolutely.
But the goal is,
Or
just like in
1,000.
anything, is you just want to be right more than you're wrong. Like, if we're right 70% of the time, yeah, we feel really good about that.
And you can't
wrong.
you can't get too discouraged if it doesn't go your way, because it's gonna, not every trade you're gonna win. Yeah, so I mean, if you blow one and your buddies are busting balls on you for 6 months, it's fine. Just get right back on the saddle, try it again, yeah, and let's go. I mean, that's the only way you're going to improve your team. You can't just sit back and let things passively happen to you, because nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? You're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to spin your tires. You're going to be sitting there in the middle.
And some people are better at drafting. So, in that case, focus more on your rookie drafts and try to acquire draft capital. Some guys are terrible at drafting rookies and are much better at making trades. Well, then trade your picks and then trade for players that are more like find what you're good at, and then lean into that niche.
It's a good thing to do. Like Matt said, don't be discouraged when things don't go wrong, because things will go wrong. And we've seen it where people get trade burnt and then they don't want to trade anymore because they're so afraid that they're going to get burned and bent over again. But like, it's going to happen. Like, I've made terrible trades in my life. I traded Le'Veon Bell right during his rookie year straight up for Monty Ball. I talk about it all the time. I've made trades that have been disastrous. But on the opposite side, I made trades that have been absolute steals and people completely regret it. It's about finding windows. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we do a podcast for, to give you, Matt and I have been playing Dynasty for almost 20 years. So like, just the information that we've had over the years and kind of just regurgitate out there. And again, we just try to be right more than we're wrong. So let's get into some of these guys. But before we do, I got to tell about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. It's my favorite place to play best ball fantasy football. It's the number one place to play best ball fantasy football. And right now, they have Best Ball Mania 4 going on with their chance to win $3 million with only $15 million in prizes. I'm literally joining one after the other.
And that's not doll hairs, right? Those are real
Oh,
dollars.
those are strong dollars, my friend. You could be super rich. Super rich. More than Pat Coran, because this year it's $3 million, not $2 million. And he lives in New York, so those taxes are high. So right now, Underdog, it's all you do. Listen, what do we love to do? We love the draft. It keeps our brain sharp. We're looking at value. It kind of helps you even in Dynasty to kind of gauge the value of players right now. Like if you join a couple best ball drafts, like $3 best ball drafts, right? And you're like, man, this one player, like player X, like Rachaad White, for example, right? Wow, he keeps going like pretty high, like the 6th round. Like people are really into Rachaad White right now. Like, and I have him. Like maybe I can get a first Rachaad White. Let me throw him out there. Like, stuff like that is like, it's letting you know how the community is. So that's where Underdog helps you as well. It kind of gives you a grasp of like live ADP every time you're drafting. It's super fun. I have a great time doing it. I literally draft once the draft's open until they close. That's how much I love it. And if you sign up right now and you use the promo code NERDS, they're going to match your deposit up to $100 right now. So use that promo code NERDS. Now, even better, if you use the promo code NERDS, Dynasty Nerds has agreed to give any new Underdog user a complimentary 1-year Nerd Herd and Dynasty GM subscription with your deposit of at least $10.
What?
This is for new users only on both Underdog and Dynasty Nerds. If you already a Nerd Herd member, we will send you the most comfortable shirt in the world and send you a Dynasty Nerds shirt as well. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE. New York. In Tennessee, call 1-800-888-99789. So Dynasty Fantasy Football running backs buys. We mentioned earlier in the show, this is something that it's a championship caliber window. And if you build your team right and you're somewhat weak at running back, there's always running backs out there. They're on that cusp of 26, 27, 28 that are people are trying to offload because they know the window's there. And you're like, I got to offload this guy. And there's not a lot of buyers because the only buyers are going to be contenders at that point. So sometimes you can get slight discount of multiple seconds or, sometimes like in Bob Lung's situation, like he knows like I'm not getting a first for both of these guys. Dalvin Cook's probably going to get traded and whatnot. And I got Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon already on championship caliber team just for running back depth to go with already the running backs that I have.
For one first, right?
One first. Yeah. And I already have Christian McCaffrey, Dameon Pierce, and somebody else too, but I needed that other running back to feel really good about it. And I'll take the big thing here is Joe Mixon that I was really excited about, and that goes to my first running back as a buy. I think Joe Mixon is a fantastic buy in football. We talked about earlier, there's a lot of rumors that he might get cut because of his salary, and I didn't think he was going to cut. That's why I said in the show. And he's probably the running back where even when it's time to renegotiate, we see kind of like the Aaron Jones situation. Some of these guys will just renegotiate their deals down the road or take a license money down the road because they know they're not going to get in a secondary market, and they'd rather stay somewhere they know they could succeed. And that's what Joe Mixon's done in this offense. We know this offensive line has been terrible. We know until Joe Burrow arrived with Jamar Chase, this offense has not been really good. When you look at Joe Mixon over the last couple of years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, he was running back 10 last year in PPR leagues, despite missing 2 games. He was running back 4 in 2019. In 2020, he missed from week 7 on, but weeks 1 through 6, he was running back 9. In 2019, he was running back 13. In 2018, he was running back 10 in PPR leagues. So outside of 2019, he was a top 10 running back 4 out of the 5 years. And even in that 1 year, he was running back 13, so he's a high-end running back too, which is a championship caliber running back. Joe Mixon's only 26 years old. So he's still got 2 years to hit that wall of death, which 2 years, we just about mentioned before.
He's 26 and 302 days.
So he'll be 27.
He's going to be 27.
Yep.
But still, 27 and then 28 and 20 years the death year. So he's still got 2 years left of viability. And what I love about it is Samaje Perine's gone as well.
Sure.
So Samaje Perine, somebody who they involved in the passing game, and Joe Mixon's viable in the passing game. So he can come in and he's going to be the guy this year for sure. And when Joe Mixon's the guy, he puts up running back 4 overall kind of numbers. Those are the kind of numbers to get. He's pretty much, if he stays healthy, locked in for a top 10 finish on an offense that's upgraded their offensive line. They signed Orlando Brown, which is somewhat of a shocker, so a really good left tackle. They're moving Jonah. You said he's reporting, right?
Yep, he's coming. Yeah, so he'll be on the right side.
So he'll be on the right side. They, with the receiving core, with Joe Burrow, they have to keep it honest and open up those running lanes as well because they got to respect that passing game. With Samaje Perine, who kind of ate into Joe Mixon's carries, especially at the end of the year, but Joe Mixon was probably a little bit beat up. He did miss those couple games at the end of the year. Joe Mixon is in line to see his passing game increase and third down viability increase, which should see an uptick in fantasy football production. And I'm okay with that because I'm okay with the way it stays as running back 10. And right now for Joe Mixon, who's only 26, which, again, is key here. He's only 26. He's only a year older than – he's the same age as Christian McCaffrey. He's a year older than Saquon Barkley. He's only a year older, pretty much, almost 2 years, than Najee Harris. You look at Najee Harris, you're like, oh, he's a young guy, and Joe Mixon's an old guy because he's been in the league so long, but that's not the case.
Yeah, Najee came out old.
Yeah, so Joe Mixon still offers – he's not the Dalvin Cook out there, right? I got 1 year maybe, or like Zeke last year, 1 year. You probably got 2 viable years of Joe Mixon left. And right now, when I look at the Dynasty Nerds Trade Finder, he went for, these are super flex leagues, Cam Akers, 223 seconds. He went for Dalton Schultz and a second and a third. So for some reason, people are trading, and it's probably because of that news, like he might get cut because of his salary.
Sure. Absolutely.
That news is kind of like...
And he had some off-the-field stuff, questionable stuff, too.
Forgot about all the off-field stuff, but all that, like Cincinnati the whole time was just like, nope, he's our guy, right? Like he's viable. And people right now in Dynasty are treating Joe Mixon as that older 27-year-old, just turned 28-year-old running back. And for me, that screams value. Mm-hmm. He's my number 1 buy for championship caliber teams because 1, he gives you a 2-year window, which you absolutely love for your first. You get 2 viable years, and you're getting, from what history shows us, a surefire home run threat running back 1. And again, you don't throw those you don't throw that around lightly because there's only 12 of these guys. There's only 12 of them. And Joe Mixon in this offense has shown that he's one of those guys consistently. There's not many running back 1s out there today that you can go buy for this cheap. Joe Mixon's at the top of the list. If you want to win your Dynasty League because you need running back help, even if you have 2 okay running backs and your third's kind of like, you go out and you trade for Joe Mixon, and your second guy who's maybe it's like even a DeAndre Swift, you put Joe Mixon in your lineup and you worry about that third guy later. The best buy in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now, running back, in my opinion, is Joe Mixon.
Well, I mean, I like it. I do think, obviously he offers some good short-term value, total win now type of move. And he's very consistent. He's going to be right around 10, 11, 12, 13. That's kind of where he finishes almost every single year. So for championship teams, that's huge to me. You know what I mean? You want to be able to just know what you're going to get from a guy. You don't want one of these roller coaster rides where who the heck knows what you're going to get week in and week out, because that really, for a championship team, that's difficult to navigate. And you want to make it as easy as possible. And I do feel like Joe Mixon's kind of one of those guys that you just plug and forget, and you just kind of look the other way, and he's in your running back 2 slot or running back 1 slot every week.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I'm sorry to cut you off real quick, though, but it kind of reminds me, Matt and Garrett, of like Zeke Elliott 3 years ago. Like Zeke Elliott was in that window where he was like 26 and people were, because he was in the league so long, treating him like that early 27-year-old, late 20-year-old running back. And in that span, those 2 years, he was a running back 1 for both years. Right. And he kind of fell off a little bit last year.
He was like still 9 or 10, right? Yeah.
A flex spot. But for 2 years, he was a running back 1 that you got at that discounted value where you were able to buy him for a late first, which I did. I got a lot of stuff on Twitter going, people like, oh, way to go, way to go. But meanwhile, I got running back 1 production 2 years in a row, and that's all you can ask for.
The big thing for me in all this, because I was one of the guys that was a little bit afraid of the situation. I had been a big Joe Mixon guy. I remember, us even debating him on the year that he was like running back 13, and I said he was a running back 1. And so I've been a Joe Mixon guy, supporter for a long time. But I was very worried. I was very worried this offseason because it was a very cuttable contract, because the off the field stuff. What has shifted the narrative for me more so than anything else, and there were a few running backs that had the same type of thing happen for me this offseason, was the NFL draft. I fully expected them to use a day 2 pick on a running back. They didn't. The only running back they brought in was Chase Brown. Look, they might be high on Chase Brown. We're not high on Chase Brown. I don't see a lot there. I mean, sure, that could cut into a little bit of the receiving work, but that's always been the case with P. Ryan there and other guys. So nothing's really changed. If anything, there might be a slight uptick in usage in the receiving game because it's a young player as opposed to an established player.
Right. I think Samaje is better than Chase Brown in all respects.
Yeah. Correct. Are you trusting Chase Brown to get out there and pass protect?
Heck no.
No. A strong bag coming through the wind might knock that guy over.
He was the guy getting tossed around, wasn't he?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, dude.
One of them.
I was like, literally, if he went through like a Division I defensive line, you gave him 10 tries at first and goal on the 1, he probably wouldn't get in all 10 times.
Yeah, he was.
He was that
Olaying
bad.
on a couple of them. He just got ragdolled on a couple.
I got a lot of hate on Twitter about that by the Chase Brown truthers, but we'll see who's right. I know what side I'm on.
We all know what side you're on.
Matt, how about you give us one of your buys?
All right, yeah. So my first buy is also a guy that's he's a running back going into a second contract here.
That's contrasting what I'm saying.
I know. So it kind of goes against the grain of what Rich is saying, but I think it's worth it. So Miles Sanders is my guy. And, last year he finished as running back 13. Right now in this past ADP that we kind of pulled together and sent out, and we were talking about a little bit last week, running back 22. So I think to me, that's just too big of a kind of just difference there to ignore. And really, I mean, he comes over to the Panthers from Philadelphia, and their backfield is a mess. The only guy there that's worth anything is Chuba Hubbard. And, between his rookie season and last year, his numbers just went down. They used him less. And, sure, Chuba missed a little bit of time. It was only a couple of games, but I think we all know what Chuba is, and he's not more than a
very one-dimensional.
He's a secondary guy. He's never going to be the guy. So this might be the cleanest situation I feel like Miles has had in years. And there's already a lot of talk about them wanting to get him more involved in the passing game and kind of get him back closer to those rookie year numbers where he had 50 catches. So all this, for a guy that already finished last season as running back 13 and is getting discounted for whatever reason this season, it's all like kind of a perfect storm here for him to kind of, in my opinion, be a sneaky guy to catch more passes, do a little bit more. I'm not saying that he's going to go from running back 13 last year to running back 2 or 3 or something. I don't think he has that kind of ceiling. But with the young rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, that's likely going to be starting. I really do think he's going to be a nice little outlet. We've seen him throw passes, Bryce Young, to running backs just last year. I mean, Jamar Gibbs got a bunch of them, 44 or 45 passes in college. So we know that that's an element in his game that he likes to use. And Miles Sanders is the guy that fits that mold in his current offense. So I really do think this is one of those perfect storms of a guy that's 26 years old. He's getting discounted heavily as far as ADP, but also when I went into the trade finder in a super flex league, just a second-round draft pick, 1 second-round draft pick for a guy that's borderline running back 1. That's fantastic.
And it's probably an outlier trade just to say, 'cause most people probably wouldn't be doing that, but it's crazy.
Probably not, but I saw it. It was there. Somebody did it. And, so Miles Sanders and Marvin Mims for Tony Pollard. For a guy that I see on a very similar plane. Like
for Tony Pollard?
For Tony Pollard. So it was Mims and Miles Sanders.
And Sanders for Tony Pollard.
For Tony Pollard. So you're getting what's equates to around late second, and Miles Sanders you had to give up just to get Tony Pollard. So really it's one of those things where the production is going to far outweigh what you actually have to pay for this guy. And I'm not exactly sure why. He's only 26 years old. He just turned 26. It's not like
brand new contract.
It's not like he's creeping up on this 28, 29 range or anything like that.
He's got 2 years guaranteed pretty much.
He has 2 years on that contract fully. I mean, that they can't really get out from underneath it without, having a huge cap hit. So he's going to be there for a couple of years. There's all positive buzz on what they want to do with this guy. And last year he finally started scoring touchdowns again.
Yeah.
So I really do like Miles Sanders. I'm not sure why he's getting discounted other than maybe some rookie fever right now. So take advantage.
Sure. No, I'm with you. And you're looking at a lot of the running backs in his ADP range right now. He's running back 22. That puts him in like almost in like the 80s, 90s as far as ADP goes for the Nerd Herd. So
79.
He's a great value overall. A player that I do really like quite a bit, and we've seen the good full skill set. And look, right now his ADP on here, he's the 79th player overall, but his ADP is 85th. Like right behind him is Isaiah Pacheco, somebody that
one-dimensional
1 year that we've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would much rather have somebody that I know is going to get the workload. Kansas City just moves and uses their backs however they see fit for that game. And it's going to be the Miles Sanders show. They paid him. This is going to be a good, and even if it's just use him for 1 year and then trade him for the second year, that's fine too. You can get one good year out of him, then move on and recoup whatever you just paid for him.
Yep.
And you might even get more back if he has a really solid season.
Yeah, big Miles Sanders fan. Absolutely loved his 1 year of tape coming out of Penn State. Like literally from a scouting standpoint, he's somebody who I thoroughly enjoyed. Thought he was really misused there in Philadelphia for the first couple of years. Got back on track last year, and he produced. Matt mentioned like he's somebody we always thought was viable in the passing game, but they wouldn't allow that in the early years in Philadelphia, which is kind of weird. We always thought it was weird, like when they wouldn't start passing to him.
Well, they did it his rookie season. Rookie season, 50 catches. Then it just dropped off a ledge.
Afterwards, yeah, That was so long ago. And you're right. In Carolina, he's in a really good spot with Bryce Young, the young running back with not a lot of wide receiver weapons around him. Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo. So there's not a lot of weapons around him.
It's Thielen, it's Hayden Hurst, and then really just a bunch of unknowns. DJ Shark,
Jonathan
Mingo, and Terrace Marshall. So those guys are big time question marks.
And the biggest thing the biggest thing that makes him a buy and such good value is again that contract. That 2 years pretty much guaranteed contract for Miles Sanders goes back to hashtag 2-3 year window. Yes, second contract, but the price, whatever price. Here's the thing I like about it as well. Definitely for contender is whatever price point you pay for Miles Sanders, the odds that price point will be in exactly the same, if not more, are really high. Outside of barring injury at the end of this year for what he'll probably produce year one, because they're going to probably rely on him heavily here in Carolina year one of his contract. So you're almost just making a lateral move. And a lot of times when you trade for these running backs, Joe Mixon falls in that same category. Usually what the price tag is, you can literally go in there, make your championship push. And then after you do that, if you feel like your team's kind of old and you want to offload, the value there, the recoup value is probably usually pretty similar. And sometimes you could end up getting more because it just depends how desperate a team is. And then if you have depth, like these are guys that like even Miles Sanders, if that's his price tag right now and I don't need a running back, I'm still buying him because odds of you need a running back at some point in the season are pretty high. But the most important thing is The odds of another team needing a running back in the season are 100%.
Yeah, I was going to say almost
100%.
Almost 100%.
So again, if you're buying Miles Sanders right now, say you give up Cam Akers straight up for Miles Sanders, or say you give up in a second, the odds of you being able to get a first from Miles Sanders from a contender mid to late season are really high because everybody's thin to position, everybody needs one, and once you can start seeing the playoffs come into focus, that's where the draft picks start to fly out the window.
Yep.
And that's where I usually give up my draft picks. And these, as a contender, these are the exact kind of players that I'm targeting, like a Miles Sanders. And, you put on Twitter, like, I just gave a 24 first for Miles Sanders. You're going to get tons of people tweeting, oh, way to go. What do you know what I mean? Like, way to go. Like,
sure.
These guys just fall off trees, right? That doesn't matter because I'm here to win chips. And these are the kind of players you need to do. And this is the reason you have draft capital. Garrett, who's one of your buys?
All right, so this one actually fell within the window that we were talking about. We want these guys in their first contract, but I wanted a guy that actually is a value right now because a lot of times guys in their first contracts are not values. They're very expensive. They're very hard to acquire, and I'm going with Najee Harris, which is a complete 180. I almost said 360. A complete 180.
And I'm back.
From where I was originally, because I wasn't a big Najee Harris fan. I didn't think he was this crazy talent. And I think we've seen over the past 2 years, that's somewhat true. He's just been a guy that's been fed the ball a lot and a subpar offense. But here's what's interesting. After his first year, you were having to take him as one of the top 3 or 4 running backs off the board.
Way too high.
Way too high, especially for somebody that was averaging 3.9 yards per carry. This year, he had almost an identical year to the year before that. Same amount of touchdowns, basically the same amount of yards per carry. The only thing that dropped off was he just didn't have as many receptions because it went from Ben Roethlisberger to Kenny Pickett, which is something that we talked about on the show, which is one of our big concerns. But look, I don't hate individual players. A lot of times I just hate their values. And he went from way too expensive, being like the 4th running back off the board. Now I can get a guy in his 3rd year as the 12th, 13th running back off the board, which now has become a really good value. Currently in the Nerds ADP, he is actually running back 12 off the board, right behind Ramondre Stevenson and Josh Jacobs, just ahead of DeAndre Swift. So he's now a guy that's a much better value than he was a few years ago, and it's now a much better offense. They drafted Broderick Jones in the first round, so a solid offensive lineman. We've been begging the Steelers for years to take an offensive lineman early in the draft. They finally listened, took him in the first round. Anytime, and I've talked about this a ton of times, anytime you get an offense where the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach go all together into their second season, you almost always see better production from that offense. Almost unilaterally, you see that almost every time. This will be the second year for Pickett with Matt Canada, and so everything is now
there were no changes. Yep,
there were no changes, so we should expect a much better offense this year than we've seen in the past. But one of the things that makes this the best value of all is his contract. He's basically guaranteed at least 3 more years.
That's what I was going to say.
With the Pittsburgh Steelers, because he's got his 2 years left, and then they got that 5th year option because he was a first round pick. Almost every time we've seen, as long as the running back's been pretty productive, those teams are going to utilize that because the price is so much cheaper than trying to sign one in free agency. So you get 3 years out of a guy that is so much younger than Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs, contract-wise. So much younger than those guys. Christian McCaffrey, like, he is one of the, I know he was older for his class, but it's still only his 3rd season. There's a lot of tread left on the tires. I really like getting Harris this season.
Yeah, and he's a guy that just turned 25, so by the time this contract's running out, he'll be right around that age where you want to get out. Like, he's one of these guys that you definitely want to get out.
It's a one contract guy.
After one contract. But for right now, fantastic
use a
value.
year or two and then trade him.
Fantastic value. And like you said, like, it's flipped. It's finally flipped. The offensive line has improved. Najee Harris last year, running back 14 in PPR, and you're getting them right around that, right? Like, so it's a good range. You're not have to overdraft this guy. You're going to get what you pay for finally. Or maybe you'll even get a little bit extra with the added offensive line and going into year 2 of this whole kind of thing with the quarterback and all that kind of stuff. So I like all your points there.
Yeah, I was just going to hammer on what you said, that 5th year option. If you didn't mention it, like, you're almost guaranteed 3 years. of them, and that's such a good lifespan at the running back position. It's such a long time. I know it's hard to think about it because you get these guys that, like the Joe Mixons, the Kamaras that have been around for a while, right? Saquon, even though we had the production there, McCaffrey, who's missed the last couple of years. So like, it's easy to like say 3 years in a long time, but if we go back 3 years and look at all the top running backs, you're looking at guys like Chris Carson. You know what I mean? Like, so like the landscape does change so drastically at that position. It's why those receivers, when you look at them wide receiver ones, like it's pretty consistent. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago about like right now the landscape of how strong it is with young receivers. There's like 9 or 10 of these guys that you feel really comfortable about.
Hard to break in.
They're all 25 or under. You know what I mean? That's not even the DK Metcalf. I don't think we mentioned that list either, and he's 25. So I like the Najee pick because there's value there. And it's like, and that's what you're looking at. Same with the Miles Sanders, like what kind of security can you get with money with running back? Because that's the thing. If running backs are insulated with money, then teams aren't going to just eat that money at the running back position. They're going to put them out there because there's some kind of usage there. And we saw like even a Jag running back can produce if given the opportunity. And when you're paying a running back, they're going to get the opportunity. There's a reason Zeke Elliott, when people were like, oh, Tony Pollard's so much better, but Zeke's getting carries because like, yeah, dude, I'm paying this dude $18, $20 million. Like I'm giving him the football. You know what I mean? Like they're, them and the quarterbacks, like they're insulated when it comes to money.
Give him the football until his legs fall off.
Like receivers, it's easy to kind of weed them out no matter what you're paying, like the Kenny Galladay's and whatnot, like Dwayne Bowe's. Like you can just ISO those guys out because even when they're on the field, then you just use them as a distraction. When a running back's on the field, like either they're doing something, and most times when they're going to run the ball, they're going to get the carry. So
something else I wanted to mention
value there.
Something else I wanted to mention real quick with Najee before we move on. The amount of touches that this guy gets, he was top 5 in rushing attempts again last year. But on top of that, of all of these guys that are in like the top 15 running backs or so, he was also one of the guys that had the most receptions out of that group. So there's a lot of total touches to be had here for Najee Harris. So I think at the end of the day, you get the age. He's cheaper than he's ever been, and you get the volume, which is volume is king.
Yeah,
in fantasy
52
football.
targets last year, 249 attempts. So, geez, right around 300, right?
Yeah, you can't. That's dynasty gold.
Yep.
It really is.
All right. Well, before we move on to our next guy, let's talk real quickly about FFPC. Launched in 2010, FFPC is the home to the largest high-stakes dynasty league community in fantasy football. Over 1,000 active leagues. And look, you can do $100 leagues. You can do $5,000 leagues. It's all up to you. You can get those like a little more simple, a little safer. Like, bro, I'm high stakes. I want to win some real cash, some real do-re-mi. You can do that over at FFPC. And best of all, there's orphans that you can just go in there and you might even get a little discount. And they have never had a league fold. That is huge. Nothing's worse than a league that you've built your picks, you've built the right team, you've done all these things, and then people are like, I don't want to play anymore. It's the worst. Head over there, promo code NERDS. You get $25 off any entry for new members. So use promo code NERDS at myffpc.com for $25 off any entry.
I love myffpc.com.
Head over to FPC.
That's why we made them available. I know right now the new app, they won't be available right away as we integrate those new leagues, but like my FFPC is one thing that you can go into the Dynasty GM and run your leagues off of. So, all right, my next guy is somebody who I've been talking about. He's been a buy before, actually, and I thought I was like maybe beating a dead horse here.
Is this King Henry?
No, this is not the sell episode, buddy. But this is a player, again, that I truly believe in. And I know I've been kind of beating a dead horse here, but I'm, if I got players I believe in, I'm going to keep preaching it, when there's value to be had.
Yeah, I've talked about him as a buy too. I'm with you.
And with this player, I think he's a huge buy. He's only 24 years old. He doesn't turn 25 till like late mid-December. And that's J.K. Dobbins for the Baltimore Ravens. This is a player that I truly believe is going to be a top 6, top 7 fantasy football running back this season. Really excited about where this is going in this offense and the player itself. The player itself is somebody who comes in and he's averaged over 6 yards per carry for the most part. It's somebody that he's come in and like last year he got mad in the playoffs. He's like, I need to be the number one guy here. Like he's saying like, I want to be the guy. I need to be the guy here out loud. And when he came in before he tore his ACL for his rookie year, he looked really good. They tore his ACL, had to clean up last year. But he came in for the cleanup. He started to really put together again. And what I'm really excited about him too, kind of like the Joe Mixon thing, is like, will you start getting viable in the passing game? Because Gus Edwards, that's not his game.
Right.
And Gus Edwards is number 2 running back there. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Gus Edwards doesn't make it out of camp. He's due $5.6 million against the cap, but they can save $4.4 million by cutting him. That's a lot of money for a running back. Definitely a number 2 running back. And we saw at Ohio State that J.K. Dobbins is viable in the passing game. Even though so far I think he's only got about 32 career targets, which isn't good enough. But what excites me too is like they get rid of Greg Roman and his offense.
I think that's going to be huge.
And I think that's been a huge hindrance to J.K. Dobbins. And they bring in Todd Monken. And we all remember Todd Monken from his Tampa Bay days where he ran his air raid offense in 2018, and Tampa Bay was the number 1 passing offense. But then he goes to Georgia and helps them win back-to-back championships, and he changes offense for Georgia, where he ran that 2 tight end system there. And, obviously he had Brock Bowers, he had Darnell Washington.
Really
we have 2 really good guys
Washington.
there. And they actually average 198 yards per game rushing. And when you look at Baltimore, and you look at, obviously you have Mark Andrews, they have Isaiah Likely there, who showed that he was a nice rookie tight end last year. You got some nice weapons in Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay.
Just drafted Zay Flowers.
And they just drafted Zay Flowers in the first round as well. So some options there. And the fact that they paid Lamar Jackson so much money, the highest paid player in NFL history on a year average per year basis, knowing that he hasn't been there at the end of the last 2 seasons, like they're going to put emphasis on this year and going forward on protecting Lamar Jackson, which is reining in some of those rushing games that, maybe design rushing games that Greg Roman was going to design. Right. And, use that to probably open up, J.K. Dobbins a little bit more in the flat, obviously the tight end systems as well. But with I think the receiving weapons around him and with Lamar Jackson, this really should open up the ground game for J.K. Dobbins. And he has to be hungry at this point to really produce and put himself in position for that second contract. He's got the youth, he's got the offense, and he's got the weapons around him, and he's got a pretty good offensive line as well there in Baltimore. So this is somebody who can come in, put up, I expect, running back 1 numbers. My expectations, top 6 right around there. But if I can get running back 12 out of him, that's a huge win.
Heck yeah.
And right now, same thing. What he's going for is you can get J.K. Dobbins for a late first. Like, people are getting real excited about like Quentin Johnson and things along those lines. If you need running back help, if you're looking for a young running back with upside, and again, going back to the college tape that I absolutely adored with him and DeAndre Swift as my 1-2, 1A, 1B in that draft class, he can come in, new offensive coordinator, new system, new happy quarterback, and really come in and produce. Because I expect them to rely on this ground game and actually use the running game for the first time since Lamar Jackson's been a Baltimore Raven.
And if all that other, naysayers about injuries and all that kind of stuff wasn't enough motivation for J.K. Dobbins, it's also the last year of his deal.
Yes.
So he's playing for money here.
And we always see upticks there.
We always see a big kind of jump there. So I do like to see him, or I do expect to see him do a lot better this year. And I love him as a buy. So yeah, he's 24 and a half basically years old. So you still have some years on this guy as well. I do feel like he's just kind of coming around. He hasn't had a lot of tread taken off the tires here in the first couple of years. So I do think he's a guy that could be viable into his second contract. So even if you have to give the first to get him, I still feel pretty good about that.
And he runs strong, so it's a good goal line opportunity there. Definitely somehow if they get rid of Gus Edwards,
It's wheels up.
Sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
So they bring him bringing a guy like Kareem Hunt or somebody,
Yeah, and they could easily still bring in one of these old, guys that are still out there, Ezekiel Elliott or somebody like all of that is in the realm of possibility, but all of these guys that could happen to. I mean, we have no idea where some of these guys will still land, but everything that we know about J.K. Dobbins, he has been successful at every single level. He's been successful in basically all the games that we've seen him play. I know it hasn't been as big of a sample size as we would like, but let's also rewind to last year, because I remember people saying, I'm tweeting about how excited I am, how he's putting up numbers, blah, blah, blah. People are like, yeah, but have you seen him run? So yes, I'm watching football. So yes, I've seen him run, but you're telling me that he's running for over 100 yards and he's still not 100%. And you could tell by the way he was running, he did not look like his full self. So if he's able to put up 6 yards a rush and 100 yards a game and things like that, and he's not fully good to go, imagine what a full offseason of rest is going to look like. And often it's not the year after the ACL. It's usually 2 years. Now, there are some freaks in nature. Adrian Peterson did it. And so it happens. But for most guys, it's usually 2 years later where we really start to see them become the guy that they were.
I'm still convinced that wasn't a real injury. Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. His was like the last game of the year too. And
there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah. The fact that, the dip is, you always buy the dip. If you're going to buy a running back for ACL injury, you always buy the dip right when they come back. Because usually pretty solid. Like the buy for Javonte Williams isn't right now. The buy for Javonte Williams is like week 5, week 6. Because, with Samaje really into his time and him not producing.
Not now.
And same with JK. And what I love about that as well is, I love the fact that JK stopped in the season when he knew he was a viable asset to get his knee cleaned up because he knew he wasn't 100%. Mm-hmm. So when you're like, oh, watch his tape. Yeah, he knew it too. He knew he wasn't doing exactly what he wanted to do. Like he couldn't make those cuts that he wanted to make that we saw that he could make. JK had the ability to make matrix style cuts in the open field and almost get lateral there in the open field. He's that dynamic with the football in his hands from tape. And listen, I know that college tape, and now it's been 3 years, so time has got there's a big window there to have fallen off. But everything I've seen, even banged up, is shown to me that this is still a viable Dynasty Fantasy Football asset, and I am buying.
Yep, I'm with you, man. All right, I'm going to move on to my next buy. Probably not as sexy as yours, but still pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think this guy's a little bit. He's been hated on a bit here. I'm going to go right to him. Antonio Gibson. Only 24 years old, coming off the board right now as running back 41, 133 in our ADP. So right around the 11th round, almost 12th round. Last year finished as running back 26, though. I think that's to me, that was at least surprising.
Sure.
I wasn't, I knew that he had kind of fallen out of favor there, and Brian Robinson was kind of grabbing a hold of that job and running with it.
Well, he had to miss. Brian Robinson also missed the first 4 weeks with the gunshot wound.
Correct. There was that going on. But the good news is they didn't bring in any fresh competition in this competition. It is Antonio Gibson.
Did you hear him talking about Chris Rodriguez? I know we don't like him, but apparently
we had a 3rd round grade on him.
They had a 3rd round grade on him,
and that's fine. And I was going to say, when they were talking about Chris Rodriguez, Ron Rivera actually went out of his way to bring up Antonio Gibson as a guy that they wanted to get more involved.
That was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just happened. They're like, we need to get this guy involved more.
So combined his comments, Ron Rivera's comments, with the entry of Bieniemy into this offense, and Bieniemy as a history of involving running backs in the passing game specifically.
Sure.
There's really no one on the roster besides this converted wide receiver that's playing running back that has much in the passing game. Brian Robinson doesn't offer much in that. Chris Rodriguez doesn't offer much in that. So really, I do think that this role is going to fall upon Antonio Gibson, and based on the comments of them wanting to get more involved, sure, could they be talking about a more involved between the tackles situation? Yeah, he's big enough to do that as well. He's 220 pounds. He kind of fell into the doghouse because there were some fumbling issues a couple of years back, but last year 0 lost fumbles. So I mean, he might have fumbled a few, but at least they didn't lose them. And last year, his stats weren't that bad to begin with. He had, I think, 46 catches last season for Gibson. So he's a guy that is talented, and maybe he wasn't getting the usage that probably he deserved based off his athleticism and kind of his profile. But with Bieniemy there, I do believe that he's going to be the main beneficiary from a fantasy perspective. So this is a guy right now that's going for a 24 third and a 23 fourth in the trade finder. So just crazy discount.
It's literally free.
Right. Gibson and a second for a second and a third. So this must have been one of these situations where
moving up in the round.
So and there's another person that it was just a third, a 24 third. Mm-hmm. So this is a free move for you in a lot of leagues, or a very, very discounted cheap move. And even the ADP suggests running back 41. I think he can outperform at least what he did last season and get you viable running back 2 type of numbers just based off the fact that last year, Jerick McKinnon, who offers almost nothing between the tackles, was running back 20 in Bieniemy's offense.
And that wasn't even until late in the season.
Exactly.
It even became viable.
Right. So I think Antonio Gibson has a very good shot of outperforming ADP and outperforming anything that you're going to pay for him at this point. I don't think he's going to be this guy that's ever going to be a running back 1. So don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I just think he presents a lot of value right now, and he could be for the price, and he could be sneaky good as far as getting you good running back 2 numbers. So if you're on a championship team, he might not be sniffing your starting lineup week in and week out. He might be a 3rd or 4th option for you, but at that price, who cares?
Yeah, for a late 3rd. If you're a championship contender, give him a 3rd.
Yeah.
Right? At that point, you're just like, I'll give you a 3rd. They think 3rd, but you're literally giving up almost a 4th round pick.
Yeah.
So I like the standpoint of that where, like, yeah, you're not saying go buy Antonio Gibson because, like, he's your starter, but there's a chance he could be your flex or your starter, and you're giving up nothing for him. So it's a value buy as well, which is what you're looking for sometimes. Like, we're saying names like Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, but sometimes it's just value as well. And I talk about this all the time where, like, if you're a championship caliber team, I think the biggest mistake that teams don't make at this time of the year is trying to find value in depth.
Build up your depth, yeah.
A guy like Antonio Gibson's like a perfect example. Okay, what running backs can I get for a 3rd? Maybe Jerick McKinnon. If you can do that, I think that's a good buy as well. Jerick McKinnon definitely falls in that category for contenders.
You get years, though, with him.
Well, the Gibson,
McKinnon's 31.
Yeah, you get some kind of years with Gibson, for sure. So, like,
Gibson's 24 years old.
McKinnon's a more surefire thing, but Gibson, you get the upside for the same price tag. And I'm still buying both at that standpoint for depth.
Go get them both. If you know what I mean.
This doesn't do it for me. Like, I get it. You know, he's one of those guys that are really cheap, but I would rather, like, throw out a late second and get, like, Aaron Jones, somebody I know who does have the role, instead of hoping, like, he does more than Brian Robinson and Chris Rodriguez, like, isn't a thing really. Like, I think for me, there's just, like, too many hoops involved. Like, I get it for, like, a 3rd or a 4th or, you know, like, that kind of stuff. So I understand it, but I think I would much rather, if I'm a contender, I would much rather just target a slightly older running back that I know has a job than waste assets on a maybe could be a flex play for me.
Yes, I like it opposite of, like you mentioned, like only a 3rd or 4th. Like, I like to. You say Aaron Jones for a second, like, I'm down for both is what I'm saying. Like, if you say you're going to the year and, like, you only have 2 running backs, like say you had Zeke, you know what I mean, and you had Kareem Hunt, and you're hoping Kareem Hunt would turn into a starter this year. Obviously, that boiled out with the loss of his burst. And then say your starters are Kenneth Walker and Dameon Pierce, and then you got, like, Zeke and Kareem Hunt. Like, then you go get Aaron Jones, but then you also do this move as well for depth, or obviously Jerick McKinnon, because I think the price tag is so cheap. And you're right. I mean, I don't love the situation as well, but I will go back to what he said, because I noticed that as well, and it kind of put a mental note in there as well. The fact that Ron Rivera was bringing up Antonio Gibson by name for somebody, like, before it was in Doghouse, they were talking about, remember this time last year, talking about Brian Robinson.
Sure.
Almost like, oh, yeah, we got to give this guy a chance to bring him in. We're like, oh, okay, but what about Antonio Gibson? Like, he's good and he's viable in the passing game. We know Brian Robinson's not. You know, and somebody, Chris Rodriguez. And in the fact, if he can just fill out that role of being a PPR running back, and that's it. That's his role, a la the Jerick McKinnon, you know, there's value there.
It makes me think, like, hey, these coaches were talking, and Bieniemy was like, oh yeah, we can get this guy involved in the passing game, and then that's something that Ron's almost like reiterating. You know what I mean? Almost regurgitating something that maybe a conversation that's happening behind the scene. Hey, do I know that for sure? Obviously not, but that's how I interpret, like, little things like that.
And I understand. I understand it for the price. I do for the price. I do understand it for the price. For me, I'd rather just, like, wait till week 1 and see, like, oh, he is being that guy. Okay, I'll pay 2/3 instead of 1.
Yeah, but then the price is probably a second now.
And I mean, after 1 week, I doubt it would jump.
But I think what you say too is, like, I think again, this is only a contender move. As a late 3rd, like, you're literally giving away nothing. Like, even this draft class that's abundant in the late 3rd, like Tyler Scott is who you're getting.
I don't feel good about. Yeah, I don't.
You know what I mean? That's what you're getting. So like, if I have any chance at a running back depth, then I'm taking that over a guy like Tyler Scott. Because again, you could be able to get Tyler Scott for that late 3rd next year when he doesn't produce right away. So who's your last guy?
All right, last guy. We're going with a geezer this time.
Oh, yeah.
A guy that's a little bit older, but man, is he good. And he has the opportunity to potentially have his best season to date. That is Mr. Nicholas Chubb. Now, Nick Chubb last year 1,500 yards that he put up last year. But you know what he doesn't have this year? Doesn't have Kareem Hunt.
No Kareem.
Kareem Hunt was the guy that was the third down back, so to speak, on all of those third down opportunities. Nick Chubb usually came off the field. Kareem Hunt came on the field. And even like when Hunt wasn't available, they would find someone else to do it.
And 2 minute drills.
2 minute drills,
He
yes.
was also off the field.
So
yeah, D'Ernest Johnson gone as well. So
Ernest Johnson's gone. Like there's a real opportunity. Last year, Kareem Hunt, 123 rushes that won't be there and accounted for. And he had 44 targets in the receiving game, 51 a couple years before that. So he was that guy. Now, do I expect Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb to get all of that work? No, absolutely not. There will be other players that are in there, but even the opportunity to even boost his receiving game 10, 15%, maybe another 5 to 10% on the rushing attempts. And he's somebody, even though he's older, there is still a lot of tread left on the tires. He only has 2 seasons as an entire NFL career where he has over 250 total touches. So there is a lot of tread still left on these tires. They've used him in a way that they want him to be a long-term asset. Still has 2 years left on his contract, so it's not like this is the end and we'll see what happens.
And he'll get all 2 years.
And he will get both.
He's a Cleveland favorite. Like people in Cleveland absolutely adore him. The only thing you have to be somewhat cautious of with Nick Chubb, but it's going to be a positive as well because I think Nick Chubb is a can in the passing category.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can see some of that Kareem Hunt work, is all signs out of Cleveland are pointing that this offense is going to change pretty drastically, and they're going to throw the football a ton more than they used to. Think of the back half of the last year of the Browns, how much they threw the football. It's going to be that, and I'm good with it too.
Because what that means is we have much lighter boxes now. Yeah. Nick Chubb has always had to run against heavy boxes because it's a lot of 2 tight end stuff and it's always heavy boxes. You get this man one-on-one with anybody, he's winning that.
Best running back in the NFL.
So I think lighter boxes is only good news for Nick Chubb.
And you're talking one of the best offensive lines in football. If you look at any offensive line rankings, the Browns are going to be in the top 3 in every single one. They bring in another pass catching tight end and Jordan Akins, who has familiarity with Deshaun Watson, number 1 route runner in Amari Cooper. They trade for Elijah Moore. Again, real dynamic in creating separation versus one-on-one coverage. And then they bring a speed guy like Marquise Goodwin. They already have Donovan Peoples-Jones, and they draft a big, tall receiver, future prospect in Cedric Tillman. So this offense is literally built to be open back up and start spreading the ball around. And like you mentioned, that's really good for Nick Chubb because any kind of mass match versus a linebacker, one, he's either stiff arming him to the turf or he's just going to make a miss because his feet are absolutely dynamic. And for the age, I still don't think there's a dip there in Nick Chubb's value.
Is he 28?
But he's going to be 28.
He's going to be 28.
Yeah. This will be his age 28 season.
Later in the year, right? He turns 28 later in the year?
He might have even already.
Or did he just turn 28?
I had it just a second ago. Let's see. He is...
How old are you, Nick Chubb? Nicholas Jamal Chubb. Look at
I feel like
he's 27 and 140 days. So he'll turn during the season December 27th. So he'll be 27 most of the year.
Most of the year. So he's got that. He's probably 2 years insulated.
Yep, and he has
an outlier.
Yeah, he has that 2-year contract. And right now, as far as our ADP goes, even though you're expecting him to put up these crazy seasons over these next 2 years, he's still being drafted well below other guys that are in his same age range, like CMC and Austin Eckler. Those guys are being drafted well ahead. And Nick Chubb has gotten it done every single year. He has been a running back 1 every single year on a per game basis. And even just last year, even without the massive receiving workload, running back 6 on a per game basis. And he was healthy. He played every single game. So
love it. Love Nick Chubb. Obviously, I have the jersey up over here. My all-time favorite Browns running back is Nicholas Jamal Chubb. My opinion, arguably the best running back in the NFL. Pure runner.
Yep. I agree.
So that's it for the Nerd Show. Make sure to check out UnderdogFantasy.com. Use that promo code NERDS. Make sure to FFPC. If you enjoy the show, don't be afraid to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. We appreciate it. And we have a long summer to get you guys ready for the season. And it's only 3 months away.
Summer
so it's not too far away. Hot boy summer.
Adios.